The avoidant is watching their life collapse in real time, and every piece of the destruction connects directly back to how they betrayed you. Not traditional betrayal. They didn't cheat, they didn't steal, they didn't lie about major things. But they betrayed you in ways that are just as devastating. They betrayed your trust by being inconsistent when you needed reliability. They betrayed your effort by doing nothing while you did everything. They betrayed your vulnerability by refusing to be vulnerable in return. They betrayed your hope by letting you believe they would change when they had no intention of changing. They betrayed your love by accepting it fully while offering nothing equivalent back. These betrayals felt manageable to them while you were absorbing the impact, while you were the one dealing with the pain of their inconsistency and unavailability and emotional dishonesty. But now you're gone. You stopped accepting their betrayals. You removed yourself completely. And without you there to absorb the dysfunction, the avoidant is being forced to face the full consequences of how they treat people. And those consequences are destroying everything they thought was stable in their life. You need to understand something important. You didn't cause their life to fall apart. You simply stopped preventing the natural consequences of their behavior from manifesting. While you were in the relationship, you were functioning as buffer between the avoidant and reality. Your patience was covering up their inability to show up. Your understanding was compensating for their emotional unavailability. Your effort was making the relationship work despite them contributing almost nothing. You were essentially holding their life together by accepting treatment you shouldn't have accepted, by staying when you should have left, by continuing to believe in potential they had no interest in actualizing. But when you finally left, when you finally stopped buffering them from consequences, reality came crashing in. And reality is brutal for someone who spent their life avoiding it, through finding people willing to absorb their dysfunction. The avoidance life is falling apart in ways that are comprehensive and interconnected. It's not just that they lost you, though that's significant. It's that losing you revealed patterns that are now destroying everything else. They're failing at work because the same avoidance that destroyed your relationship is preventing them from forming professional connections necessary for advancement. They're losing friends because the same emotional unavailability that hurt you is making them impossible to maintain friendship with. They're mentally deteriorating because the same defenses that kept you at distance are now keeping them isolated in ways that are psychologically unsustainable. Their entire life is imploding, and the implosion started with betraying you, but has expanded to include every domain, because the patterns that made them betray you are the same patterns that make them incapable of sustaining anything healthy anywhere in their life. The professional destruction following personal betrayal. The avoidance career is collapsing because the same patterns that betrayed you are betraying them professionally. They can't form genuine connections with colleagues because connection requires vulnerability they can't access. They're alienating superiors through the same emotional unavailability that alienated you. They're burning bridges through inconsistency, showing up sometimes, disappearing other times, that makes them unreliable in ways that have professional consequences. Where you tolerated their inconsistency because you loved them, employers and colleagues won't tolerate it. Where you gave them infinite chances, the professional world gives them one or two. The betrayals that worked on you don't work in professional contexts, and the avoidant is learning this through job loss, through missed promotions, through professional relationships deteriorating in ways that are damaging their trajectory permanently. The work collapse is also happening because losing, you removed the emotional stability that allowed them to function professionally. The avoidant might not have admitted it, might not have recognized it consciously, but you were providing foundation that their professional life was built on. You were the person they could come home to, even if they were distant. You were the stability in the background, even if they took you for granted. You were the safety net, even if they acted like they didn't need one. But now you're gone, and the foundation you provided is gone with you. The avoidant is trying to maintain professional performance while drowning emotionally from losing you, and they can't do both. The emotional distress from betraying you and losing you is bleeding into their work in ways that are making them unable to function at their previous level. The professional destruction is also about the avoidant's inability to ask for help. In relationship, they couldn't ask you for help, couldn't admit they needed support, couldn't be vulnerable enough to say they were struggling. And the same inability is destroying them professionally. They're struggling at work, but they can't tell anyone. They're overwhelmed, but they can't ask for assistance. They're failing, but they can't admit it, or seek the help that might prevent complete collapse. The avoidant is going down with the ship because asking for life preserver would require admitting they need help, and admitting need is exactly what their trauma won't allow. So they lose jobs they could have kept if they'd been capable of saying, "I need support," lose opportunities they could have salvaged if they'd been able to show the vulnerability that asking for help requires. The career falling apart is teaching the avoidant that the defenses that feel protective are actually destructive. The emotional unavailability that they thought made them strong is making them impossible to work with. The independence they prided themselves on is actually isolation that's preventing them from building the collaborative relationships that career advancement requires. The control they maintain through distance is preventing them from being flexible and adaptive in ways professional success demands. Everything they did to betray you, the distance, the unavailability, the inability to be vulnerable, is now betraying them professionally. And the betrayal is costing them the career stability they took for granted while they were busy destroying your relationship through those same patterns. The social destruction that mirrors the relational betrayal. The avoidant isn't just losing you, they're losing everyone. Friends are pulling away because the same betrayals they committed against you, they're committing against their friendships. They cancel plans last minute the way they cancelled on you. They're emotionally unavailable to friends the way they were unavailable to you. They can't show up for friends going through difficult times the way they couldn't show up when you needed them. And friends like you eventually get tired of one-sided relationships where they give and get nothing back. The avoidant is experiencing social isolation that's the direct result of betraying people who cared about them through consistent emotional absence. The friend loss is particularly painful because it's revealing a pattern the avoidant could deny while you were the only one complaining. When you said they were too distant, they could tell themselves you were too needy. When you said they weren't showing up, they could tell themselves you expected too much. But now multiple friends are pulling away for the same reasons you left. Now multiple people are expressing the same complaints about unavailability and distance. The pattern can't be denied anymore when it's happening across all relationships. The avoidant is being forced to recognize that the problem isn't that everyone else is too demanding. The problem is that they're incapable of meeting even reasonable relational needs. And this recognition is devastating because it means they're the common denominator. They're the reason all their relationships fail. They're the problem they've been blaming on everyone else. The social destruction includes family relationships deteriorating. Family members who've tolerated the avoidance distance for years are running out of patience. They're tired of the avoidant not showing up for family events, not being present even when physically there, not sharing anything real about their life. Family is expressing frustration and hurt that the avoidant has been dismissing, and the dismissal is creating rifts that are widening into permanent disconnection. The avoidant is alienating people who were committed to staying in their life simply by being who they are, and the alienation is creating loneliness that compounds the pain of losing you. The social collapse is also forcing the avoidant to face that their independence was always dependence in disguise. They thought they were independent because they didn't need deep connection, but they did need the shallow connections they had with multiple people. They needed the friend who invited them to things, even though they usually declined. They needed the family member who checked in, even though they barely responded. They needed you absorbing their emotional unavailability while providing stability and presence. The avoidant was dependent on all these people tolerating their limitations, and now that people are stopping their tolerance, the avoidant is discovering they're not capable of the true independence they claim to value. They're just alone, and alone is different from independent. Independent people choose solitude. Alone people are isolated because no one can tolerate them anymore. The avoidant is learning this distinction through losing everyone. The mental health destruction they can't avoid anymore. The avoidant's mental health is collapsing in ways they can no longer defend against or deny. Depression is setting in as they face comprehensive loss. They lost you, they're losing their career, they're losing friends and family, they're losing the identity they constructed around being unbothered and independent. The depression is the avoidant's nervous system finally registering the cost of their patterns, finally feeling the feelings they've been defending against, finally confronting that their defenses didn't protect them from pain, but just delayed the pain until it could arrive all at once in overwhelming intensity. The anxiety is also severe because the avoidant is recognizing they're losing control of everything. Control was always the avoidant's primary coping mechanism. They controlled relationships through distance, controlled vulnerability through withholding, controlled outcomes through leaving before they could be left. But now everything is out of control. Their career is failing despite their efforts. Relationships are ending despite their attempts to maintain them at arm's length. Life is happening to them rather than them controlling their life. And the loss of control is creating panic that the avoidant has no tools to manage because all their tools were about maintaining control that's now impossible to maintain. The mental health collapse includes the avoidant finally feeling the shame they've been defending against their entire life. Shame about who they are, about their inability to connect, about the trail of hurt people they've left behind. Shame about betraying you specifically, someone who was patient with them, who tried to understand them, who gave them more chances than they deserved. The shame is overwhelming because it's not just about specific actions, but about core identity. The avoidant has to face that they're someone who hurts people who don't deserve to be hurt, someone who destroys relationships that could have been good, someone who betrays care with coldness. And facing this about themselves is creating shame so profound it's becoming identity-level self-loathing. The mental health destruction is particularly acute because the avoidant has no support system to help them through it. You could have been their support, but they betrayed you until you left. Friends could help, but they've pushed friends away. Family could be there, but they've maintained such distance that family doesn't feel comfortable being close now. The avoidant is experiencing mental health crisis alone because their patterns have ensured they have no one to turn to. And the aloneness is making everything worse because humans need connection to regulate distress, but the avoidant eliminated all their connections through the same betrayals that eliminated you. They're trapped in suffering they created, with no one to help them because they betrayed or drove away everyone who might have helped. The regret that's becoming unbearable. The avoidant is drowning in regret about how they treated you, and the regret is growing more intense as time reveals what they lost. They're regretting specific moments, the times you needed them and they weren't there, the times you were vulnerable and they were cold, the times you tried to talk about the relationship and they shut down. Each regretted moment is being replayed obsessively, and in replay the avoidant is seeing clearly how badly they treated someone who deserved better. The regret is about recognizing they had opportunities to be different, to show up better, to treat you with the care you deserved, and they squandered every opportunity because they were too defended, too scared, too committed to their patterns. The regret is particularly painful because it includes recognizing you were offering them exactly what they needed, and they rejected it. You were offering patience while they worked through their issues. You were offering understanding of their patterns. You were offering love that was unconditional enough to accept their significant limitations. And they betrayed all of it, the patience, the understanding, the love. They took what you offered, and they used it to stay comfortable in their dysfunction rather than as foundation for growth. The regret is about recognizing that they had the perfect partner for someone with their struggles, and they destroyed the relationship through being incapable of receiving what they were being given. The regret also includes the avoidant, comparing you to everyone they meet now, and finding everyone lacking. No one is as patient as you were. No one understands them as well. No one is willing to work with their limitations the way you did. Every comparison reinforces what they lost, reinforces that you were rare, reinforces that they're never going to find what they had with you again, because what they had with you was specific to your capacity for tolerance and understanding, and most people don't have that capacity. The avoidant is learning through failed attempts at new connections that you were special. And learning this after betraying you and losing you is regret that compounds daily with every new person who isn't you. The unbearable regret is forcing the avoidant to face that they destroyed their own chance at happiness. No one else destroyed it. Circumstances didn't destroy it. You didn't leave because you were too needy or too demanding. You left because they betrayed you too many times, hurt you too consistently, showed you clearly that they weren't capable of partnership. The avoidant has to live with knowing they are the sole author of their current misery. They wrote their life's destruction through their choices to betray someone who loved them. And living with that level of self-responsibility for suffering is close to unbearable, especially for someone whose defense mechanisms are all about avoiding responsibility for their role in relationship failures. The awakening that's too late. The avoidant is finally understanding things they should have understood while you were still there. They're understanding that emotional availability isn't weakness, it's strength they don't have. They're understanding that vulnerability isn't danger, it's requirement for intimacy they were too scared to risk. They're understanding that partnership requires showing up consistently, being present emotionally, doing the work of maintaining connection, all things they betrayed you by refusing to do. The understanding is arriving with perfect clarity. The avoidant sees exactly what they did wrong, exactly why you left, exactly what they should have done differently. But the clarity is coming after you're gone, which makes it worse than useless. It's torture. The awakening includes the avoidant recognizing that their independence was actually just fear. They weren't being strong by maintaining distance. They were being scared. They weren't being mature by not needing anyone. They were being wounded. They weren't being boundaried by keeping you at arm's length. They were being defended against the intimacy they actually wanted, but were too traumatized to accept. All the stories they told themselves about why they were the way they were, all of it is being revealed as rationalization for trauma responses they never addressed. And seeing through their own bullshit is painful because it means years of their life were organized around lies they told themselves, lies that cost them you and are now costing them everything else. The avoidant is also awakening to the fact that they needed you more than they ever admitted. You weren't just nice to have around. You weren't just convenient. You were essential to their functioning in ways they didn't recognize because you were always there. You were the emotional anchor they took for granted. You were the stability that allowed them to feel safe being avoidant. You were the person whose presence made their life work even though they couldn't appreciate your presence while they had it. Now you're gone and everything is falling apart. And the falling apart is teaching them that they needed you desperately. They depended on you completely. They were never as independent as they performed being. The awakening to their need for you is coming after they've lost you, which is timing that feels like cosmic punishment for taking you for granted. The impossibility of making amends. The avoidant is recognizing they betrayed you and they want to make amends, but making amends is impossible. You're not available for their apologies. You've moved on. You've built boundaries they can't cross. The avoidant is sitting with the reality that some betrayals can't be repaired, that some damage is permanent, that some people leave and don't come back, regardless of how much the person who hurt them has grown or changed or understood. The impossibility of repair is its own form of suffering because it means the avoidant has to live with the guilt of their betrayals without any way to alleviate that guilt through making things right with you. The impossibility includes the avoidant understanding that even if you were available, even if you would listen to apologies, words wouldn't be enough. They betrayed you through actions, through not showing up, through being unavailable, through refusing to do their work to be better. And reversing those betrayals would require sustained action, would require being different consistently over time, would require becoming someone they're not currently capable of being. The avoidant might understand now what they should have done, but understanding doesn't create capacity. They're still too defended to be vulnerable. They're still too scared to show up emotionally. They're still avoiding the therapy and deep work that would actually change them. So even if you gave them another chance, they'd betray you again because understanding without capacity is just awareness of inevitable failure. The impossibility of amends means the avoidant has to carry permanent guilt. They hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt. They betrayed someone who loved them. They destroyed something good through their own limitations. And they can't fix it, can't make it right, can't undo any of it. The guilt becomes a permanent feature of their psychology, something they'll carry into every future relationship, something that will affect how they see themselves and how they relate to others. The betrayal of you becomes a defining moment in their life, the moment that taught them through devastating consequence that their patterns destroy everything they actually want. And the teaching is permanent because the consequence is permanent. You're not coming back. What you need to understand about their destruction. Understanding that the avoidance life is falling apart after betraying you is validating. It confirms that how they treated you was actually as bad as it felt, that their betrayals had consequences. that you weren't wrong to leave. The destruction of their life is evidence that you were right about the relationship being unsustainable, right about needing to protect yourself, right about requiring more than they could give. Their life falling apart isn't something you should feel guilty about. It's something you should receive as confirmation that you made the right choice, leaving someone whose patterns were destroying you, and were always going to eventually destroy them too. You also need to understand that their life falling apart is not your responsibility. You didn't cause their life to fall apart through leaving. They caused their life to fall apart through betraying everyone, including you, through maintaining patterns that make healthy relationship impossible, through refusing to do the work that would change them. The destruction they're experiencing is a natural consequence of their choices. You just stopped preventing those consequences from being felt. The avoidant is experiencing what they've been avoiding experiencing while you were absorbing the dysfunction for them. And while it's painful to witness someone suffering, especially someone you cared about, their suffering is not yours to fix or to feel responsible for. Understanding their destruction should reinforce your boundaries. If the avoidant reaches out, if they express regret, if they want another chance, their life falling apart is not reason to give them that chance. Life falling apart doesn't equal capacity development. Suffering doesn't equal healing. Understanding doesn't equal change. The avoidant's life is falling apart because of patterns that are still intact unless they've done intensive therapy to change them. And intensive therapy takes time, months or years, not weeks. If their life has been falling apart for a few months and they reach out, they're not reaching out because they've changed. They're reaching out because they're desperate to stop the suffering, and they think having you back will stop it. But you being back won't heal them. It will just give them another person to betray, while they continue avoiding the work that would actually make them different. The choice between sympathy and self-protection. You can have sympathy for the avoidant while maintaining boundaries that protect you. You can recognize that they're suffering, and that their suffering is partly the result of trauma they didn't choose to have. You can understand that their inability to show up for you came from wounds created in their childhood. You can have compassion for how much pain they must be in to watch their life fall apart. All of that sympathy and understanding is compatible with refusing to make yourself available to them again, refusing to sacrifice your well-being for someone who hasn't done the work to be different, refusing to return to relationship with someone who betrayed you repeatedly because their life being destroyed is making them desperate. The choice between sympathy and self-protection is not actually a choice. You can have both. You can feel for them and still protect yourself. You can understand their trauma and still refuse to be with someone whose trauma makes them hurt you. You can hope they get help and heal while being clear that their healing is not your job and not something you need to wait around for. Sympathy doesn't require availability. Understanding doesn't require sacrifice. You can give them compassion from a distance while giving yourself protection through boundaries that don't allow them back into your life unless and until they've done years of therapeutic work that demonstrates actual capacity change rather than just desperation-driven promises. The avoidance life is falling apart after betraying you, and the falling apart is comprehensive. Professional failure, social isolation, mental health crisis, unbearable regret, awakening too late, impossible repair. All of this is consequence of patterns the avoidant maintained despite every opportunity to change, patterns they used to betray you until you finally left. The destruction is appropriate, is the natural result of treating people the way the avoidant treats people. And while you can feel sympathy for their suffering, while you can understand that trauma is driving their patterns, while you can hope they eventually heal, you don't owe them presence in their destruction. They built their life's collapse through their betrayals. They can experience the collapse alone, can face the consequences alone, can decide whether to use the consequences as catalysts for change or as reinforcement of their victim narrative. That's their journey now. Yours is different. Yours is moving forward with your life, building with people who can show up, requiring treatment you deserve, and never again accepting betrayal from someone whose trauma makes them betray everyone who tries to love them. Their life is falling apart, and that's sad. But your life is being rebuilt, and that's what matters. You survived their betrayals. They're not surviving the consequences of their own behavior. That difference tells you everything you need to know about who was the problem and who made the right choice by leaving.